Hello, chess fans. Welcome to another edition of Chess Chat, a program designed to give you, the viewer, a better understanding and an appreciation of the wonderful world of chess. I am your host, George Merijanian, Program Director of the Wachusett Chess Club at Fitchburg State College. This club meets every Wednesday evening from 7 to 11 at the McKay Campus School at the college, currently meeting in room C179. And with me, once again, is the current Wachusett Chess Club champion, one of the strongest and most active nationally rated chess players in North Central Massachusetts, Marty Lane. Marty, welcome.
Hello, George. Good to see you again.
It's always a pleasure seeing you, Marty. Marty, 2 weeks ago, a little more than 2 weeks ago, exactly on May 17th, the U.S. Chess Championship ended in St. Louis, Missouri.
Right.
And we have now a new U.S. chess champion. His name is Hikaru Nakamura.
Right.
And he's 21 years old. He had won this championship in 2005 at the age of 16. And we're going to show we have some photos of him. This is Hikaru at the board at a tournament in St. Louis. Again, the tournament was held in downtown St. Louis at a brand new chess club. And Hikaru won this, scoring 7 points out of 9 possible points. A clear first, a phenomenal result. And he won a first prize of $40,000, which is big money for a chess player. Here's a young Hikaru. He's probably around 9 or 10, certainly a New York Yankee fan. He lives in White Plains, New York. And his stepfather, he was born in Japan, came with his Japanese father and mother to this country when he was 2 years old, and his mother remarried, and his stepfather is friends with one of our chess club members at the Wachusett Chess Club, Ken Gurge of Leominster, who went to college with Sunil Weramantry. That's his stepfather.
Right.
So
is he an international master?
He's a World Chess Federation master, what we call a FIDE master.
But a theoretician and a teacher.
Oh yes, he is one of the leading chess teachers in this country, and he certainly coached and taught his stepson to become one of the finest players in this country.
Right.
Now we're going to go to an interview that was done right after he had clinched the first place in this U.S. Championship on Sunday, May 17th. Let's go to that interview that Hikaru Nakamura gave in St. Louis, Missouri, with two chess journalists.
Welcome to the 2009 U.S. Chess Championship finale. We actually have a champion, Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura. Congratulations.
Thanks. It's quite a ride.
You won clear first, going full steam ahead in the last round. Can you talk just briefly about your final round game?
Well, I think in the final round game, I definitely surprised Josh with my opening choice. And after that, I mean, we were still in my preparation for quite some time, and then it was just a very simple, straightforward game for me, really. There was nothing too dramatic considering the stakes.
And you had said earlier in the tournament that Josh was one opponent that you were a little bit wary of playing, having had some bad results recently. How did that affect your, preparation going to the last round?
Well, that didn't really affect my preparation. I mean, to be fair, Josh has had good results against me, but when you look at the history, I think maybe the last 4 or 5 games that I've played, I've gotten black every single game. So I'm not sure that's really a fair, way of calculating the results, because I've never had white, really. I mean, having said that, though, I did get white against him in the U.S. Championship. I believe it was 3 years ago, and I did lose. So I was a little bit wary, but once again, I mean, if you're scared of players, then you might steer clear of certain positions. And considering the situation where I felt like I needed to win today, I just felt like giving it everything, and so I played something which was a little bit double-edged, but it worked out.
Speaking of attitude, it seemed to me that you approached the whole tournament with an extremely confident and aggressive attitude, which I know is sort of one of your hallmarks. But how do you actually develop that as a player? Because a lot of players say that about you and they wish they had that killer instinct in the same way.
Well, I think really what it comes down to is it comes down to the fact that I'm not afraid of losing. And I think when I was much younger, I lost a lot of games, especially when I first started playing. And so through losing all those games, I lost the fear of losing. And once you don't have that fear, it becomes much easier to just simply play. certain types of positions especially.
Certainly a lot of people were wondering about your choice of second. This fellow Chris Littlejohn is only about 22-20, a relatively low-rated master, which I would say is an unorthodox choice in a second for someone of your rating class. Can you talk about how that came about and why you went that way?
Well, I mean, I actually was good friends with his roommate, Jason Doss, who's, I don't think he's the admin on ICC anymore, but I was good friends with him, and it was through him that I met Chris, and he sort of started preparing me for a few games on and off in 2006, and then pretty much since 2007, he's always been preparing me. I mean, I don't think it really matters what your rating level is if you can understand the style and you can prepare openings. That's all that matters. Just because he's say 2200 as opposed to being 2400, the only real difference in my opinion is that his technical skills aren't as good as say an I am. But if he can prepare me, that's all that matters, because I'm the one playing the game. Okay, now preparing you, I mean, again, that makes a certain amount of sense, but most 2700 Grandmasters will still select a second who's at least, 2500 Grandmaster, maybe occasionally International Master, but no one that I know of has somebody who's 2200. Is that a product of computer databases and computer analysis in opening preparation that works, or what? Well, all I'm going to say as far as that goes is that the methods we have are very good, and so it doesn't matter what his rating is.
How does this victory compare to your victory in the 2005 U.S. Championship?
Well, obviously 2005, it will always be special in a certain way, which this one can't quite measure up to. But in terms of the competition and how I played, I felt that I definitely played better this time around. So if I had to compare the two, I would say that this one was definitely better than the last one.
But that one was special just because it was your first and you were so young?
It was the first one, yeah, definitely. I mean, for instance, I still remember going to the final game against Ildar, and it was the same situation as here, where I was tied with Alex Shapunsky at the time, and we both had already played, so we were playing other players. And in that game, I mean, I found a way to win the game, but from the start, I was just so nervous that it really affected how I was going about analyzing the position and the moves I was thinking about. It was just a totally different mindset. Whereas here, I really was not nervous at all at any point during the last couple rounds. The only time I think I was in my game against Alex, perhaps, Onashuk, in the 6th round when I actually was in a little bit of trouble. But other than that, I never got nervous, so it was a lot more relaxing this time.
Is it because there didn't feel like there was as much at stake for you?
I would disagree, actually. I felt like coming to this tournament there was a lot more at stake for me than last time, because lately my results have not been particularly inspiring, to say the least. I mean, I don't need to get into why they haven't been so good, but it's just been a rough couple of months for me. So I really came into this tournament wanting to prove something, whereas in that one, there always were expectations that I might win, but I was never really considered a favorite, whereas here I definitely was considered a favorite, and so it felt very vindicating to win this tournament this year.
So any plans to celebrate your victory?
I'll probably do something, though I think I'm still a little bit in shock, because I didn't actually expect to win it, so we'll see. Probably something tonight.
So congratulations, fantastic result. We enjoyed so much hearing about your games in the commentary room.
I'm glad it was exciting for everyone here, and hopefully I can repeat next year.
So our 2009 U.S. chess champion, Hikaru Nakamura, will have last-minute tidbits and news from the Chess Club and Scholastic Center of St. Louis on uschesschamps.com. Thanks for joining us.
Well, that was an interview with our new U.S. chess champion, Hikaru Nakamura. And what Marty and I are going to present to you, the viewers, is the final round game that Nakamura won against Grandmaster Joshua Friedel of Goffstown, New Hampshire. The strongest player in New Hampshire, one of the strongest players in the country, and one of the most promising up-and-coming players in the country. So in this game, Nakamura had white, and he opened how?
He opened by moving his e2 pawn to e4, which we've seen on many occasions. It occupies the center square, and it opens up two important diagonals for the queen and for the bishop.
Okay. So Friedel, in response to e4, he plays his pawn on e7 to e5. Right. For the same reason, opening up the diagonal for his dark squared bishop as well as for his queen. Right.
And then Nakamura develops his king's knight to f3
All right.
as his second move. It attacks the e5 pawn. It develops a knight, a good, strong, and probably the most common second move.
All right. Friedel, on his second move, plays the knight on b8 to c6, defending the pawn on e5.
Okay. And Nakamura, well, he would have the choice of playing a number of different things that we've talked about, but he chooses to develop his bishop on f1 to c4, puts it on a diagonal going directly towards the f7 pawn on the black side. It will become a critical point of attack.
Now, in this position, after this bishop c4 move by white, there are only two good moves for black. Black is rather limited as far as replies. One of the replies could be bishop c5, playing symmetrically, but this would lead the game to what is known as the Italian game, or Italian opening. And in this country, and in English-speaking countries, it's known as the gioco piano. Gioco being the Italian word for game, piano being quiet. Again, it is a very popular opening with young players. And again, every serious chess player should learn the gioco piano. Right. I'm a strong advocate. But Josh Friedel chose the other good move, probably a more promising move, is knight f6. So the knight is coming to f6, and now we have a defense. And some people actually consider this not a defense, but a counterattack. But it's known as a two knights defense because we have black's two knights out here in the game. So,
and the problem that it poses is that the knight on f6 now attacks white's pawn on e5, and so he would need to do something. He could be fairly passive and defend that with d3, or he could defend it with knight to c3. But what Nakamura chooses to do is to mount a really aggressive attack on that f7 square by playing knight to g5 as his fourth move.
Okay, and now there's an interesting story behind this move. This knight g5, which is moving the same piece twice in the opening, we did a program on Dr. Tarash, Dr. Zygmunt Tarash, and Dr. Tarash was a very doctrinaire, very classical player who believed you should never move a piece twice in the opening.
Right.
And he labeled this move in German. He called this a Stumperzug. Stumpe is a bungler.
Right.
He said only a bungler would play a move like this.
Right.
Now, world champion Wilhelm Steinitz, about whom we've done a program, thought this might be the refutation of the two knights defense.
Right.
So we had a difference of opinion. We have a difference of opinion back 100 years ago, because it does violate the principle of moving the same piece twice, which you shouldn't do as a rule. But here is justified because we have a double attack. The knight and the bishop have a double attack on this pawn, this very weak pawn, most vulnerable pawn, f7. So what does Friedel do? The only way to stop that pawn from being captured, either by the bishop with check or the knight coming into fork, the only way to stop that is what Friedel played, and he played d5. All right, so that was his fourth move.
Okay.
Attacking the bishop.
Right. So as white's fifth move, he takes the pawn. E takes d, threatening the knight.
Right. Okay, now we have the pawn on d5 attacking the knight on c6. Now, we could go in, explain that this knight takes d5, we look at the position, is not recommended.
No.
This knight takes d5 is not recommended because there is something known as the infamous fried liver attack. It involves knight takes f7, forcing the king to take here because of the attack, fork, and then the queen comes out to f3 check.
A double attack on the
knight. It is a very aggressive and it's not recommended. Very complicated. It requires great knowledge on the part of the players here. So let's go back to here.
We've taken the pawns.
Okay, so let's go back to here. So, all right, so we're here.
Right.
So they were in this position. So instead of knight takes d5, what black plays here, what black plays here is knight a5.
Right.
The knight comes a5 to the side of the board,
the
attacks the bishop. So this is the position.
Right. So what White could do, for instance, he could defend that bishop just by playing to d3. But this is really passive. He's embarked on, it's contrary to his original plan. He's playing an aggressive opening. This knight is on g5.
I'm sorry, that's right. That was the double attack. Knight g5.
He's played an aggressive opening to play to suddenly switch horses and play something passive is really contradictory to the whole plan.
But you know,
really.
Paul Morphy, the great American player
Right.
Paul Morphy,
He did that.
preferred
Right.
d3. Okay, so what do we do here instead of d3?
Okay, he continues basically attacking. He plays bishop to b5, check.
Okay, all right. So Friedel, instead of blocking with a piece, he could actually block with a bishop. He could block with this knight on f6 back if he wished to. But he chose to block with c6. So on his sixth move, he played c6, blocking the attack, also attacking the bishop and the pawn at the same time.
Right. And White continues by playing d takes c6 for his seventh move. Actually, thereby now he's got two pawns in here. He'll come up with a pawn extra at this point.
Well, what Friedel does, he recaptures on his seventh move. He takes the b pawn.
Right.
B takes c6.
Right.
So by taking with the pawn,
Now he attacks the bishop again.
yes, the bishop is under attack.
So he's got to do something. One thing he could do is play queen to f3 so that if black were to take, the bishop and the queen could take the rook.
Okay.
Okay. Or the other alternative is to put that bishop somewhere. Well, he can't go here onto a6, and he can't go to c4 because of the knight.
Right.
He could, in another game that we looked at, Steinitz-Chigorin, Steinitz played the more standard bishop to e2.
Okay.
Steinitz later on in that same match played f1. But what Nakamura chooses to do, he plays an unusual looking move. He plays the bishop to d3. And again, looking at those rules of thumb that we always talk about, it looks bad at first glance. It blocks off the pawn on d2, which in turn blocks off any hope of opening up the bishop on c1. It looks like it's in the way.
Right.
But it turns out that it seems to have some merit to it, as it turns out.
Well, it certainly controls the e4 square.
Right.
Yeah. So this is a rather interesting move, and this was played over 100 years ago.
Right.
It was played. It was played against Emanuel Lasker. The great Emanuel Lasker faced this, and other players have faced this from the 1890s. But what Friedel did here, instead of he could have played bishop c5. That would have been a very active
attacking
placement,
the f2 pawn.
just putting the bishop along this diagonal. Instead, he played bishop e7. So that was his eighth move in response.
Okay, so after bishop to e7, White now he's only got two pieces out. He needs to develop, so he plays his knight on b1 to c3 as his ninth move.
Okay, and Black now on his ninth move castled kingside. So here we are.
And White does likewise. He castles, as as mentioned before. It gets the king to safety. It brings the rook more to the center.
Right.
Good
So
development.
both kings.
They're
are in safe
both sides
position.
are scrambling to develop.
All right. Now here's a critical point in the game, as far as planning. How does Black proceed here in a very difficult position? What Friedel chose to do is he chose to deploy his rook on a8 and bring it to the semi-open b file, and he played rook b8. So that was his 10th move. Actually, he had choices. He could have played the bishop to b7. He could have played the pawn up to c5, so he could redeploy the knight back to c6.
Right.
But he chose rook b8. That
Right.
was his move.
Right.
So now he's on the b file with the rook.
Now, Nakamura chooses to play a kind of preventative move. He plays the pawn on h2 to h3 as his 11th move. It guards that g4 square to prevent the knight. If he moves the knight here, then there's a double attack on White's knight, or he could maybe try to post a bishop there. It keeps Black off of that square, and that's basically what he wants to do with that move.
Okay. All right. So Friedel, now he's facing his 11th move, and he plays c5. He pushes the pawn from c6 to c5. It looks like it gives the opportunity for this knight to come back into play, because as we know, a knight on the side of the board. The old saying, "Knight on the rim is grim."
Right. So he's going to make a place for it.
Right. So this knight is out of place here. Has to get back into action. All right. So c5 was Friedel's move. Well, what does Nakamura do now?
Well, Nakamura wants to continue his development. He can't do anything with this bishop until he's got to find a way to open up a diagonal. It's going to take two moves if he wants to go up the c1 h6 diagonal. He'd have to move the bishop first and then the pawn. So he plays the pawn on b2 to b3, opens up the other diagonal. He could put the bishop on b2 or a3,
Okay.
attacking this pawn if he needs to.
All right, now let's look at the position on the board that we have in front of us after b3. What Friedel could have played here, he could have played the bishop on c8 to b7 and occupied this long diagonal.
Right, a strong
that would have been a
right.
very sensible move.
Right, or he could have moved the knight back.
Or the knight could have been played back to c6 so that it can actually play either to d4 or to b4,
Right.
attacking the bishop on
Right.
d3. So
Or the
both,
queen to c7.
or
He
even
could-
the queen to c7 is a good move.
Right.
These are all good-looking moves here.
Right.
What Friedel chose to play here after b3 here, he plays the rook all the way down to b4.
Yeah.
So now the rook is on
And-
the b4 square.
And I think that's premature, and I think Nakamura is going to prove that that was premature. Not a bad idea, but I think the position needed to be a little more open before that.
So this
that
is
kind of-
dubious.
I think so. It's dubious at this point.
Well, it's doubtful what the plan is.
Yeah.
Is the plan now to shift this rook over to the king side?
But
how do we get over
white
to the
controls all these squares, as we'll
Exactly.
see. And
All
we'll
right.
see how that
All right.
happens.
So what does Nakamura do here?
Well,
Response?
first thing he does, he's going to centralize his rook from f1 to e1, attacking the e5 pawn.
All right. Okay. So what Friedel does, he sees the rook is attacking the pawn. He could have played the queen to c7 to defend it.
Right.
That was a possibility. But he very wisely played bishop to b7. Now, the question is asked, why is he playing the bishop to b7 and offering this pawn? Is this a pawn that can be taken?
Because because as it turns out, white will lose a piece. If white takes the pawn on e5 with the rook.
Right. Rook wins the pawn.
Right.
However, black's response would be this knight on f6 comes back to d7.
And now
the
there's
knight
a- attacks the rook and a double attack on the knight. So
it's going to win a piece.
it's going to win a piece.
So it would
the
lose a
pawn
piece.
is poisoned.
All
You
right, so
can't
that's a
take it.
poisoned pawn.
Right.
All right, so that's definitely taboo.
Okay.
That pawn is taboo. All right, so what is what Nakamura does?
Now what a player does, any player will look at a position like this and we'll see a strong piece like the rook out in the middle of the board, and he's going to look for ways to push it around with weaker pieces. So the first thing he does is he attacks the rook with this. He's opened this diagonal. He's going to take advantage of it. He's going to put his bishop to a3 on his 14th move. Now the rook being the stronger piece, the rook has to move.
Okay, so he's rather limited where that rook can move. I mean,
Can't go back much.
Well, he could go back to the
But
b6.
then he loses this pawn.
Then he
It's
would lose
attacked.
this.
No,
then
it's
he-
not. Not the bishop covers. Sorry.
Right. But the thing is, this would be rather awkward to be driven back like this.
Right.
He could play rook to d4. That's a possibility. But he chose to play rook f4.
Right.
So he plays rook f4 on his 14th move.
Okay, and so then.
So now he's on the king side.
Right, but now again this time he's going to attack it with the pawn. He's going to move his pawn on g2 to g3. That's the 15th move, attacking the rook again.
All right. So this rook is now being embarrassed.
Right, it's all over the place.
Because it's now, this rook only has one square that can escape
right,
to.
all these other squares are
White
covered.
controls all these squares other than the d4 square.
Right.
So the rook is now forced to go rook d4. So that's black's 15th move.
And so for white's 16th move, he attacks the rook once more. He brings the knight back to f3, attacking the rook and the e5 pawn.
All right, so we have a very critical position. I mean, the position really got critical after rook b4, which again was very
Right.
dubious, and now it's getting really ugly for black.
Yeah.
And what Friedel chose to do here, he realized that he has to. If he chooses to save his rook, he's going to lose his pawn.
Right.
So what he made the decision to give up what we call the exchange. He's giving up a major piece, which is a rook, which is worth 5 pawns, 5
Right.
points, and taking a bishop, which is worth 3 pawns or 3 points. So he plays rook takes d3. That's his move.
And
So-
white responds by recapturing, the only way he can, the pawn on c2 takes d3.
All right. And now Friedel takes that pawn. Queen takes d3. So what he has gained out of this, he has given up a rook, but gained a bishop and a pawn in return.
Though he was already a pawn down.
He was
so
already
it's-
pawn down.
So he's down the exchange.
He's still down the exchange.
Right.
We call the exchange. All right, so now it's Nakamura's turn after queen takes d3.
So now he's going to take the pawn on e5 with the knight attacking the queen.
All right, so the queen is now attacked again. Now, where can it go? Well, and we also have some problems here. So the queen here has to move. Well, the queen moves to f5. Queen f5 is Friedell's move on his 18th move.
Nakamura attacks the queen again by playing the pawn, this time the pawn on g3 to g4 as his 19th move.
All right. Well, Friedell chooses not to go all the way back. Instead, he wants to stay where the action is, on the king's side. Well, he hopes to do something on the king's side, but he plays queen f4. So he's here. All right, so now what does Nakamura
Well,
do?
now if we look at it, the glaring problem for one of the glaring weakness in this position is that the pawn on d2 has not been played anywhere.
Right.
So he's going to open up the position. He's going to play the pawn on d2 to d4.
All right, so now with the pawn advance, we have a double attack. This pawn on c5 is being attacked twice here.
Right, and he can't take the pawn with the pawn because the bishop will fall.
Okay, all right, so he's in a very precarious situation here. So what he does, he plays the rook on f8 and brings it over to d8, which prevents prevents white from capturing here.
Because the queen will be exposed.
Because we have a pin. So this
Right.
rook is pinning this pawn, preventing any capture on c5.
So Nakamura unpins the queen by moving it queen to e2.
All right, so he vacates the d file, gets off the pin, and now what Friedell does after queen e2, well, he now feels he can safely take the pawn on d4 with the rook. So he plays rook takes d4 because he has the bishop protecting the pawn on c5. The rook has just won this pawn, but what he overlooked, it
Right.
did not see far ahead, is what Nakamura responded with, and it would end the game.
Yeah,
What is the move that actually ended
This
the
is
game?
every player's nightmare. You know, you see White's got all his pieces spread out there, and he's got his queen and his rook, two strong pieces. He simply brings the bishop back to c1, attacking the queen, and there's nowhere she can go.
There's no escape.
No.
This queen has no place to go. So Friedell resigned.
Right.
All right, so this is a very short game. In terms of Grandmaster chess, it's a 22-move win. This clinched first place for Nakamura. It's his second U.S. championship, and he is a phenomenal player. He's the second highest rated player in the country. He doesn't have the highest rating. Gada Kamsky of Brooklyn, New York,
Right.
has the highest, and Gada played in this tournament, but he could not surpass Nakamura in this tournament. And let's point out to our viewers that Nakamura's stepfather, Sunil Weramantri, we talked about him before.
We mentioned him. Yeah.
Yeah, and Ken Gurge knows the stepfather well. They were best of friends, classmates at college together. And Nakamura started playing rated chess, that is chess that was rated by the United States Federation, right after he turned 7 years old. Within 3 years, Marty, he became a chess master,
Right.
and that's phenomenal for a youngster from the age of 7, within a period of 3, shortly after his 10th birthday, become a master, and then at the age of 16, become a U.S. champion. And again, he's a very gifted youngster. American as apple pie. Again, he grew up in this country. Came to this country when he was 2 years old, and lives in White Plains, New York. He's played all over the world. Is a phenomenal player, and we're going to see more of him. Nakamura is a name that's going to be heard more by chess players around this country. So I hope you viewers enjoyed the game that Marty and I presented to you. The game, the ninth and final game of the 2009 U.S. Championship that clinched first place for 21-year-old Hikaru Nakamura, the new U.S. chess champion. See you next time for the next edition of Chess Chat.